There we go. All right. Well, welcome. This presentation is focused on exterior lighting for the community. You may have seen it in the EEI newsletter. We just put out an article entitled Smart and Clean Exterior Lighting for the Community. So today's Energy Bite is going to focus on that CLTC project related to that article. We have a number of industry partners as well as community partners on this project. It's funded by the California Energy Commission through their EPIC program. And California Lighting Technology Center is the lead. And then we're also partnering with our friends at the Policy Institute. So if you're online, hello to JC and Brian. The rest of these partners are the community partners that I talked about. So one of the components of any demonstration project through the EPIC program now is to work in underserved communities throughout California and have a nonprofit associated with that community help you navigate all of the site-specific needs. So those are our project partners. This project specifically highlights 3 of California's policy targets: decarbonization, improved grid resiliency, and community improvement. And before I get into what the technology is on this project, I wanted to kind of gauge everyone's familiarity with some of these resiliency topics. So was everybody in California last September? You remember? No. I have a couple of yeses in the room and a couple no's. So does everybody remember getting an Amber Alert on September 8th asking us to help with the energy crisis that was underway? Does anybody want to guess what percentage of California was dark enough by 8 p.m. to have exterior lighting help with that? So we have a vote for 30. So the options are 30, 60, and 90. Gary, do you have any answers coming in on chat? Okay. So we have a vote for 30. Actually, using this inthesky.org map, you can see that about 90% of the state was in what we call nautical twilight. Most outdoor lighting is operated on what we call a photocell, kind of similar to that gadget on top of the light fixture on the end of the table. And so it hits its threshold for how much incident light is hitting it, and the luminaire will come on correspondingly. That's how the street lights keep up over the course of the year with the changing sunset and sunrise times. So that points to exterior lighting being a good candidate to help address issues like the one that was really a big deal on September 8th. Through our market assessment that we conducted for the first year of this project, we found that there's about 5 million suitable exterior lighting fixtures in the state that could be retrofit with the technology that I'm going to show you today. So that's a big opportunity. There's a lot of variations within 5 million fixtures. So we're going to look at a few different variations of the overarching concept today as well. Second pop quiz on November 9th, so last fall, what percentage of the grid do you think was carbon-based? So natural gas and coal based on the CalISO data. Any guesses? We've got 10, 30, 50, 70 as your options. All right, we have 10 and 70. Actually, it's about 50% at 7 p.m. So why am I asking this? We've got some distributed energy resources as part of this technology package. And so looking at the supply trend and where the fuel mix is during the hours of operation for exterior lighting becomes relevant. Again, looking at that supply at midnight approximately, still hovering around that 50%. So can we help with our decarbonization goals by doing this? Yes. And so we responded to a solicitation from EPIC at the Energy Commission and came up with these goals and objectives. So the idea is that we'll have hybrid power. We're not taking away the grid connected power, but we're adding solar. We're also adding smart battery energy storage. So we have load flexibility. We're adding in a very efficient luminaire. So we have some energy efficiency gains there. We're also adding in motion sensing so the system can dim during periods of vacancy. That can be done through a couple of different strategies. That one's the deepest savings. You can do it with a simple scheduling tool. But if your pole is 24 feet or below and you've got at least 40 watts of lighting load, then you have to do a motion sensor in the state. So that's Title 24 requirement. The other objective of this is to integrate the advanced control system, working with the API functionality that comes with a lot of these network control systems from the lighting industry. You can pull in third-party signals. So the real-time fuel mix, real-time pricing, potentially integrate an email alert or a future signal if PSPS events create their signal eventually. So we've developed an algorithm to help have a construct for decision making based on system owner priorities. Do they, is sustainability really their focus? Well, then let's always go with what the fuel mix is doing. And so a lot of people are like, well, why don't we just operate off grid as much as possible? And that is an option if your system life is lower on that priority list. But the idea is to use the battery less to give it a longer shelf life out there on the pole. The final bullet there that we're looking at is circadian appropriate lighting spectrum. So really looking at all of the lighting quality work that we've done over the last decade here at CLTC and combining it with the control integration to make sure that the light and health implications for these exterior light applications are addressed, both for humans as well as other species. Migrating turtles, birds, pollinators are all greatly affected by exterior light spectrum. And so being sure to address that for the next generation of exterior lighting before it's already up on the pole, because those opportunities are lost. So this is a metric matrix that shows how we are planning to evaluate these technologies once they're installed in our demonstration sites. We have 7 different demo sites, like I said, throughout the state, scattered throughout all of the different utility territories. And we're looking at carbon-based electricity use reduction, life cycle cost analysis, warranty of the components, how much grid flexibility is gained, grid resiliency increased, and then we're also taking a look at embodied energy and carbon, because once you start adding these distributed energy resources like PV and battery, that starts to become a really important part of the analysis. And then, of course, kind of in the same vein as that circadian lighting, we want to ensure that we're reducing light pollution instead of adding to it. Since LEDs are so efficient, it's very easy to just get more light out into the space. And there is that is relevant. Like, we want to have enough lighting to be safe, but we don't want to overlight at the cost of increasing light pollution, because that also affects those species. So for the folks in the room, we've got a lot of the technologies on the front table that you're seeing on the screen. I mentioned earlier the 5 million potential fixtures throughout the state. So how do we come up with the most cost-effective solution that's going to work technically in each scenario? Well, we have to have a suite of solutions. So the solution on the left on the slide is what their industry is going with as a all-in-one fixture. So the top there is the PV panel that's actually connected to the top of the luminaire. And then you can see the controller and the battery inside in this exploded view. All of the application specific optics to make sure that your uplight is reduced. If you don't want backlight for where you're installing, you can put a house side shield. Interestingly, we just got some samples and we ordered a house side shield. And instead of, if this was 20 years ago, that would look like a big metal shield. People kind of jokingly refer to it as a Darth Vader look because it kind of looks like his helmet. So you've probably seen those. But now what just arrived last week was a 3D printed snap-on that just sits on top of all of each individual diode. So things are, I don't know how they're still changing. The last 20 years in lighting has been really fast moving, but I still get impressed every once in a while. So that's the all-in-one on the left. The middle and the right solutions are examples of what you've probably come to associate with solar combined with lighting, especially the middle. You've got that standard PV sail. And then there's typically a box on the back side of that array where the battery would live. If you want a really big battery for more off-grid operation, then it might be buried down at the base of the pole for wind loading on that light fixture. One of the more aesthetically pleasing solutions is on the right. We call that the vertically integrated PV panel. And actually, so there's 6 different facets going around the pole. Each one has PV on it. And so it's a lot easier to strap onto an existing pole. Wind loading calcs are a lot easier. However, and I'll show it in a future slide, the efficiency compared to the standard sail is about 30%. So you have to pay up front for a lot more of the vertically integrated, and it doesn't always pencil out. So I would expect to see more of the 2 on the left. Hi, welcome. Feel free to grab lunch. So the system that was on the left earlier is shown here in our lab. And when we break for a tour, you'll see a lot of these spaces. But you can see again, this was in the exploded view. This is real life, and it's also on the table here. You're looking at the system controller on the bottom and the battery in the blue there. We have it mounted on a platform in our parking lot to capture real-time data. And then we have our third-party M&V box on the side so we can understand the performance. Yes. So going back to the middle option, when I said that there's a battery on the back, this is what that box would look like. So at the very beginning, we looked at the list of partners, and a lot of it was the community-based organizations, and they're helping us to really get into the communities and through a survey tool, understand if everyone is okay with this look and feel being installed in their community before we get in there and pick a final design. And so we have 100 surveys per community, 7 communities, and we are at about 49% collected towards our goal. So we hopefully this time next year when you come back, I'll have an update on what everybody said, and you'll know because it will have informed what we install in the community. And I'll show you more about that survey later if we have time. Here's the slide I was referring to earlier, showing the energy collection index being so much greater for the horizontal PV. So that points to if communities are okay with that look and feel, really to the advantage of the system owner to go with the horizontal PV sale. But there are applications where the vertical is going to be selected for aesthetic reasons. So here are where the 7 sites are that I've been referencing. Yellow is PG&E territory, blue is SCE, and purple is SDG&E. And then we have nonprofits listed on the right there that are helping us in each of the 7 sites. I put together some slides from one of the sites. It's this Moreno Valley. Yeah, it's this guy. I pointed with my laser for the people in the room. For the people on Zoom, it's the bottom right blue site that we're going to look at. So the existing fixtures are high pressure sodium, very unique looking fixture. We actually started calling it a pumpkin for lack of a better word. I don't think that's its official name. But this is showing up in black. It's a little hard to see, but the numbered ones are the poles. This is the existing system. Our engineering staff went out with a meter and collected light measurements. So we have existing conditions documented for all 7 sites, and then combine that with the survey responses and use that to back into the appropriate lighting design when we couple that with the industry recommended practices for, in this case, for a park. So we have 2 parks, 3 apartment complexes, and 2 street applications across those 7 sites that we're retrofitting. This is one of the parks. And then we have some preliminary designs. What we've done is come up with this first pass at the designs and then ordered samples of all of the fixtures to bring in here and start to experience them ourselves before we put them into the community. And at the same time, that gives us time to collect those community survey responses and combine that input into our design. So we've talked a lot about the PV, we've talked a lot about the light spectrum and the look and feel. The piece that we haven't talked about much yet is the battery. And this graph is showing what the hybrid performance would look like with a battery size large enough to give us 3 cumulative days of operation for exterior lighting. So dusk to dawn, 3 days in a row. And that number was arrived at through our market assessment. This California Public Utility Commission, the CPUC, provides historical data on PSPS events. And so one of our engineers analyzed that data set. Does anybody want to guess what the longest PSPS event in California history was? Pretty shocking in my mind.
North Richard?
I would have to look at the I don't know the dates. I just know how long it is. 4 days. Okay. The average was 3 days, so that's how we picked our battery sizing for low and moderate fire risk areas. We decided to go with the average. But what we're recommending for high fire risk areas is to go with the high, which was 8 days. So what we're looking at here, you can see just in that December bar, you can see just a little hair of hybrid operation. So that's when it has to connect to the grid to make it all the way through. That's the longest night of the year. But otherwise, the 3-day battery gets us to be off grid if we were just to choose to be off grid as much as possible. At the beginning of the presentation, we talked about a lot of other considerations that might influence somebody to choose to be grid connected more often, and that's definitely an option with the advanced control system. But those types of examples would be like if you wanted your battery life to last longer, you would operate off the grid when it made sense financially or fuel mix wise. Any questions? All right. So that's where we are in the project. We started summer of 2021. We're about halfway through this project. We have preliminary designs, working with the communities to collect the pre-retrofit survey. But we have a lot of other activities we're planning to do with them. And so that's going to be ramping up here in the last half of the project as we get the systems installed at the 7 sites. And there's going to be site walks where interested community members will come out and do more of an interview-like approach and give us their feedback. And the idea is that we'll make it right for them. As long as we get the feedback in time, we are obligated to fix it and swap things out if it doesn't work for them as originally designed. And I'm not worried. I think that we have a very rigorous design process. So I think it's going to be great. But on the off chance, we have so the last few sets of slides are going through what that community survey is. And there's 18 questions. It takes about 15 minutes for somebody to take the survey. Apart from site details, we made it identical so it can be used as one like California population pool by the time we get the analysis done. So this one is for the same park that we looked at earlier. And so we're interested in how often the person uses the site. Everything is spelled out using Likert scales and very incremental steps. So hopefully we don't get a lot of free response because that is always a lot harder to analyze. We're asking them what they do. So as I mentioned, we've got parks, we've got streets, we've got apartment complexes, so that we're anticipating some various activities and then using that to help interpret the rest of their responses when we need to drill down into any kind of constructive feedback that we receive. Just asking them what their general impression is of the existing system, asking if it's overlit or underlit, asking if they feel like they can tell the color of an object under the existing light the same way that they would in the middle of the day. So HPS lighting is a great example of that. And a lot of the underserved communities where we're doing work still have that older technology where it's all, for lack of a better word, it's washed out. So say if you were looking for your car in the parking lot and your car is red, but you don't see any red cars type of situation. That's the most common. Of course, wanting to be able to identify characteristics of other people in space is important as well. So figuring out how people feel about their existing conditions. So we have metrics to show that it's improved in the way that we need it for hypothesizing it. Visual comfort is a way of getting at glare. So LEDs are really good at a lot of things, but some of the products on the market today can result in what we call a glare bomb. So if you look at it kind of like looking at the sun, right? You don't want to be temporarily blinded, especially if you're driving. So understanding the visual comfort of the existing, the idea is we'll duplicate all of this as much as possible after we install the new system. The apples to look at. Asking people if there is flickering, strobing, color shift, day burners, things that are just not operating correctly that they've noticed. Have they had a PSPS event in this area? Because that makes it more relevant to have that version of the control algorithm at that site. We really have, with 7 different sites, we have the ability to install different versions at different sites depending on what their needs are. So try and figure out that specifically, and then we can commission it appropriately. How much time do you spend outside? Are you just walking from your car to your house, or are you out there jogging in the park for a couple hours? And being able to include that in our analysis was something we thought was important. How do you feel about visibility when you're walking? How do you feel about it driving? Safety and security. How would you rate that at night? And then some free form. Anything else going on that we should know about? Question 14 is really interesting, and as budget allows, we want to add additional amenity to the polls. And so this is some options of what we have come up with that are available in the industry to add on. So community Wi-Fi is something that has come up a lot with the communities when we've done the initial meet and greet and talked to them about these options. For the parks, we're looking at perhaps adding like a charging port for home workstations, things like that. For the sites with parking lots, we could have an EV charger that is available. That's probably the most pricey option on this list. Like I said, budget available. Other additional ads that are pretty common with the network control systems are safety beacons, duress alarms, name for it. So if you, I think campus has put these on. So if you're familiar with what they have, it sends a signal back to whoever is doing, whether it be police or the campus security, and then it also does a big to help you. And then down here at the bottom, we have air quality sensing as well. During the last few fire seasons, I relied heavily on the Purple Air app. So having, especially for underserved areas where there's not a lot of homeowners buying their own air quality sensor, this came up as an idea where that could be really valuable during the summer seasons, especially. So that was question 14. Question 15 was getting at this configuration here on the right, and we wanted to know how people feel about new boxes being added to polls, especially for the apartment. Is that something that would make you uneasy, or does it need signing? Trying to figure out those types of answers so we can have all of the equipment that we need to do our study without it leading to dissatisfied community members. And then the rest of it was pretty basic follow-up. And like I said, asking them if they want to come do the site walk after the new systems are installed. Here's the current completed survey list that I talked about. Actually, I just got a new CBO on board for the Moreno Valley site, the one we've been looking at. They want to do 200 surveys for their community. That was really important and easy to do. They've got a lot of schools and apartment complexes right around their park. So that's actually going to be 8. And then we're still ramping up on Compton. We have to put together a research use agreement, right, through the residential. Yeah, that's all I had for the PowerPoint section. A lot of the slides corresponded to the technology up on the front table, so you feel free to get up and take a closer look if you're interested. And then once we're ready, we're going to go on a tour. Yeah, see. Has anybody been here before? JC has been here. Everybody else will be. Oh, and you were here last year. Okay. Lots of new tour takers. Good. And then Sherry, are you going to have me sign on my phone? Okay. For the folks on Zoom, I'm going to switch over to my phone and take you around the center if that's of interest to you. If that sounds like you're just going to get nauseous and you'd like to leave, that's fine too. Thanks for dialing in and hope to see you here in person next time. Yes, sure.
But in terms of the sites for the.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question is how were, it's not going to work. How were the sites chosen? I'm just going to go back to my slide with the with the map. Here. So before you got here, I was explaining that this research is funded through the EPIC program at the California Energy Commission. And that's relevant to your question because that is a surcharge that comes off of every ratepayer in an investor-owned utilities bill. So for instance, if you're PG&E, if you live in Davis, there's a line item on there that says EPIC fund or something similar. I should get a screenshot of that in this presentation next time. And so because of that, we want to put the technology back into the communities where the funds came from originally. And so we came up with a methodology based on number of customers. So PG&E territory is pretty huge geographically, but number of customer wise, pretty comparable to SCE. So 3 in PG&E, 3 in SCE, and then SCG&E is much smaller. But the ratios worked out to be 3, 3, and 1. And the overall, I don't think I mentioned this, overall between the 7 sites, we're doing 200 fixtures. So that kind of played into it. We started out with a list of partners that wanted to participate. And then as we got into the project deeper, our engineer just ended up going around in his car looking for things that met our criteria. So you had to have at least 10 fixtures at the site. It needed to be a non-LED. Can't retrofit anything that's already been changed over. And a number of other criteria related to like the general location. JC and I were just talking about if you're familiar with the SB 535 map tool that the Air Resource Board hosts. The CEC had us use that tool to help to figure out the definition of what underserved was. So 75 or plus on the disadvantaged for, and so as our engineer was driving around, he overlaid it with that map. And actually the Hanford apartment complex and the Arosi apartment complex are both owned by the nonprofit that we're working with. If you've heard of Self-Help Enterprises. So we're making new partnerships on this, and so that's very convenient to have that reduced at least by one number of touch points for me to manage all of this. So through those types of interactions, that's about 9 months from the start of the project to get to the perfect subset of sites. Because it ended up being a pretty big list. Question or stretch?
So obviously I've been involved with projects to some extent. And when you were talking about what are some of these add-ons, thinking for the self-help sites, the OC and Hanford site, at least thinking, I know it's supposed to be the most expensive option that you mentioned, the electric vehicle charging. But I know self-help has a big piece of the work they do is moving towards have this being part of the project. So perhaps if there is then budget considering reaching out to self-help, maybe a low seat in Hampton sites to consider charging option as an add-on, but of course it isn't. And then the other question is, I know the survey was in Spanish, but I'm wondering if there was some other language.
Great question. Yes, I showed the English version.
Right.
So at the beginning of the survey development task, all of the CBOs, the community filed in, and I asked them what they needed to reach their community specifically, and that was one of the questions we asked them. So 6 of the 7 sites said English and Spanish, please. And the 7th site, which is the Courtyard Village apartment complex in West Sac, additionally asked for Farsi and Russian. So we have the survey in 4 languages. And just regarding the self-help, that's a great idea. Obviously, they're like-minded, but they would be down to help expand that. It's just looking at some of the vehicle electrification goals for the state versus our charging infrastructure. And everyone's very motivated to increase numbers there. So, yeah, I think as much as we can overlap with that is fantastic. Other questions? Yeah. Yeah. No. That's a great question. Some of the original locations that we looked at and considered were schools, but for most of the time they didn't have fixtures. But I'm sure there are some out there. So one of the technology transfers that we're working towards is making sure that all of this is bundled up at the end of the project in like a best practice guide. And that's one of our targets. State-owned buildings, schools, CMD office, any general service managed type facility would have all of their core questions answered. And so looking at this list, that was really what we were trying to figure out, like what do system owners need answers in a case study. They get a flyer showing that this technology was installed, but they're going to want to know the life cycle analysis. They're going to want the energy savings and everything else on this slide. So we're hoping to be able to That's more applications than what we're straight in. But I'm doing a good job. Yes, the pilot program. You're fine. We do. I'm Nicole. Yeah. Yes. The question in the room was, are you leaving the technology at the end of the project? Yes, so March of 2025 is the scheduled end of the project. The hardest, so that research use agreement that I talked about that gets put in place for all of our UCB demo projects addresses that. And the T's and C's are such that they get to keep it. In addition, the trickiest part is the network control system. So as we set that up, we're the owners, but I need to hand that over to the city or the complex owner, and do all the paperwork with the manufacturer. Right now, we've been working heavily with Signify, formerly known as Philips Lighting. And so we have a plan in place to do the handoff, but that's going to be the trickiest part. And then we'll be logged out essentially, and they'll take over and get all the maintenance alerts and things like that.
I think it's nerds. Technology. Practical.
Yeah, and one of the ideas we've been considering, and I'm open to feedback from this group, is signage. So especially for the parks, I don't know, I have a 3-year-old, so I go to a lot of parks, but sometimes they're like technology demos or like, what are you looking at? And it is something like this where it's an exploded diagram, or maybe you get to play with a crank and practice understanding about energy. So that's something that we're considering doing to really make it more tangible and a bigger education component for the communities as well. Yeah. Question? One? No, you're good.
Why was the
Like dropping poles.
Yeah,
Yeah, some of the sites, the existing poles are our biggest hurdle. Because they're old and rotten and we can't just do a simple swap out for the all-in-one here. And the other reason is that they were put in the wrong spot originally. And sometimes that's the designer's fault, but usually you get the design as the contractor and you're going in and it's not what it was supposed to be. So maybe there's a sewer, you can't put it where it needs to move 15, 20 feet. And so then that unfortunately really messes up the lighting design in terms of uniformity. You have more dark spots. So we've been trying to find a happy medium between ripping everything out and actually our partners at Signify have been doing a lot of the heavy lifting for us because they are international. They have a lot of products that are available in other countries that aren't available here yet. And so in lighting design speak, there are types of distributions. So in a parking lot, you might do a square distribution, and that makes sense if you want it all around. But in a street, you want it more like an oval. with no backlight into houses and even though it's standardized, it doesn't make sense for the typical pole spacing in the US for all the reasons I just walked through. So some of the standard distributions for the Europe market though do make sense for our site specifically. And so Signify has been helping us find existing tooling that they have for those product lines so that we can have a custom fixture and save on the pole work. But that's not only a budget killer, but also that it's like disrupting the community. It's a big deal to go in and redo footings and everything. So if we had to redo all 200 poles, we would be over budget. Like the idea was to find sites where we could just do the head swap out for the all-in-one. But that's not what the community needs. And I think that that's a big takeaway of what we've learned so far. And things, actually the park that I showed you, 25 original poles, 7 of them have already fallen over. So something happened when they poured their footings 30 years ago, whenever they went in. So those all have to be redone. And so they really need this. So we're trying to get creative to make our budget stretch a little and figure it out.
So in that case, like do they need to oh, 7 goals and following, let's try to optimize. We have to.
Yeah, we're optimizing, but it's still, I mean, you can drop maybe 5 poles. Yeah. Yeah.
You know how many?
Statewide. The round number that has been being used by estate agencies lately is that 50% of the state has been updated LEDs so far. So about half of, but that's reflected in that 5 million number that I had on the market assessment. But yeah, just generally, because at this point, exterior lighting is already through the utility rebate phase of its development, and it's considered mature. Something like this, where we're integrating 3 or 4 different mature products, is new, but on its own, like the utilities don't rebate that. But through that process, we got about updated. All right, I think I'm gonna wrap it up. We've got another meeting in here coming in at 1. So I'll ask that people drop their trash by the door. And I'm gonna shut my machine down and meet you in the lobby for the tour. And I'll jump over to my phone. Yeah. Thank you for all the great questions.